Welcome back to the channel. My name's Adam Smith, and inside this GameFound previous series, I'm now showing you gameplay for the true solo mode in Uprising Curse of the Last Emperor. If you haven't had a chance to check out my how to set up video, which showed you how to get the true solo game set up here to the table and all the steps involved, I'll put a link to that in the top right hand corner. You'll definitely want to check that video out first before watching this one. Now the new Uprising Big Box, which will be a full storage solution for Uprising, along with the true solo mode, will be coming to GameFound in the near future. You'll find the link and the exact date in the pinned comment and video description. Now also in the pinned comment and video description, you're going to find a high-level summary of the different changes for setup of the true solo mode and things to keep in mind as you dive into your first true solo play. Now, in terms of the win conditions, things remain exactly the same. You still need to ensure your main faction's hero's VP tracker, so in my case up there, the red tracker, needs to be ahead of the Legion tracker and the Horde tracker in order to win. And the length of the game is still the same. It is 4 chapters long unless you choose to shorten it. In my case, for this video, we're going to go for a 2-chapter play. Now, for those of you that watched my true solo setup, you'll know that we're at the Rebel level of difficulty. We also removed any of the Red Skull hexes and Red Skull cards going into this. Now, you may not be 100% on what's going on here, but I'll go over this at a high level. In the new true solo mode, you'll be selecting a hero as your main hero, which will come with its faction as well as its units. You'll also have the feat cards as you'd expect with the starting 2. You'll get your resources, but when playing at the Rebel level of difficulty, you'll get 6 of each of the unique types of resources instead of 5, and instead of 8 AP, you start the game with 10 AP. You then select your allied hero, and it can be any hero that you have available to you, front or back side of the card. You can even choose the opposite side of the same faction you've already selected if you wish. Now, when that allied hero comes in, the only difference will be you'll go through the feat deck and you'll remove any mention of a unit inside of any of the feat cards because, of course, you're not using a faction board for this allied hero. And so because of this, you don't need any of those feat cards. So in this case, it removed 3 cards out of the deck, which also removed one of the 2 starting feat cards, which is why there's only 1 here. Now, as many of you know, Uprising has a deluxe component expansion you can pick up that will boost up the look and feel of a number of tokens that come in cardboard fashion in the core box, things like these types of resources. The deluxe components for the food, salt, and plunder will certainly make things look even better. It also comes with an absolutely stunning first player marker, and in my opinion, a much better chapter tracker. And additional deluxe components that'll make things pop in other areas of the gameplay. And last but certainly not least, from the deluxe component upgrade, there are some activation token upgrades that look like this instead of the cardboard tokens that come in the core game. Now, from the Titan expansion, I am using these Druid cards, which are larger size cards than the original core box had for them, and they also come along with Ether, and these Ether are provided from the very beginning inside the refresh phase. When you first start out the game when playing solo at the Rebel level of difficulty, you'll go ahead and place one of these Ether at each one of these cards. The Titan expansion comes with 7 of these Ether tokens, and when they're next to each of these Druid cards, it allows you to remove one if you wish to reroll all of your dice once per roll. So that's one way you can make use of the Ether. Another thing you can do is you can remove 1 Ether to activate a God power on the Druid card once per roll. You can even do both of those things in the same roll. So you can reroll, then activate a God power after that. And you can even do it on a curse. And now, earlier when I mentioned that you could discard one of these Ether in order to reroll all your dice, you cannot assign any symbols, feats, items, or other effects on your roll before you make this decision. Now, something I'm adding into this playthrough that I didn't mention during my how to set up video is blessings. You'll notice each of the blessings are in foil, so they look fantastic on the game table. Now, the rules here clearly state the one way you can use these, and there's an alternative rule down below as well. We're going to be going with the top section here, so only when 3 skeletons form a horde, or any hex places a horde or a legion, or any quest places a horde or legion, then we will tie one of these blessings to that individual, and at that point, if they're taken down, we gain the blessing. Now, as I mentioned before, these are gold foiled all the way around the trim of the card, so they look awesome. I'll show you each and every one of these in case it's the first time you're ever seeing them. Again, these are not specific to the true solo mode whatsoever, just an addition you can add in for some additional fun and benefits for taking down some of the nasty groups inside of the game that you are going to be dealing with the most. We are now ready to dive into true solo gameplay, so we'll start at the very top of the chapter track. You'll notice that my marker's down in the event phase. That's because we already resolved the refresh phase at the tail end of the how to set up video. So if you want to check that out, again, you'll have to check out that video. But it's worth mentioning there was one thing I threw back to you guys, and that is where we should roughly place the curse that came out as part of drawing the 3 new quests for chapter 1. Whenever you draw quests in the game and you happen to see the immediate trigger, you have to go ahead and do that immediately. And it says to place an activation token on every Horde card, but there isn't any Horde cards currently drawn from the deck up top yet. So if there is not, then we place a curse on any hex without an X. After all the feedback received across different areas, we're going to go ahead and place the curse up there on that unexplored salt hex that is close to where the capital is. So now let's truly jump into the event phase for chapter number 1. We're going to be adding 2 threat to all legions and hordes in play, except there aren't any in play, so we can go right past that to the next step, to drawing and reading the next event. And for the true solo mode, there are specifically created true solo events. So there'll be a deck that comes as part of the expansion in order to give you that content, and I'll show you an example of one now. If you want to see all the cards, check out my true solo setup video. Chapter 1's event is called Dreams and Omens. It comes in at a threat level 4. It says the human were obsessed with the omens found in their dreams. Their foretellers proved to be surprisingly accurate. It says to choose a hero to roll their hero dice. For each bolt or shield rolled, you may reveal the top card of either the Horde, Legion, item, or quest deck and place it back face up on top or bottom. You may do this once per deck, so it really hinges on how many bolts and shields we end up getting. So in this situation, it's open for me to choose either of the heroes to try and resolve this roll. So we can either have 3 might and 1 lead, or we can go with 1 magic and 3 guile. Now just going based on bolts and shields alone, it looks like Cal's breakout of dice is going to be the best out of the 2, although there are some benefits to rolling the other as well. But I think this is the best suited roll here for this. Let's see how many shields and bolts we can pull off. Wow, that was not a good roll overall, but we got at least 1, so we can reveal 1 card. Now, of course, I could use an ether from one of my druids in order to re-roll this to try and get more icons that match, but I don't really need to see too much at this point, I don't think. Now, this one here says to place 1 horde and place 1 horde, so before I choose which deck I want to actually resolve, I do want to take a look at the rest of this to see what's coming up, because going ahead and revealing the horde one would not be a great idea, being that we're going to see them anyway, so maybe we should actually check the top of the Legion deck. I don't have as much interest in the quest or item decks, for example. This is the enemy off the top of the Imperial Legion deck, and you can see there's an immediate effect called Dark Lullaby. When she is pulled, which she's not right now, but if she will be in the future if we leave her on the top of the deck, she's going to discard 1 of our action points for the rest of the game. So instead of having 10, we'll be down to 9. So do we want to leave her on the top of the deck, or do we want to stash her at the bottom? Now, I'm only playing a 2-chapter game, so my worry about that one coming up and affecting my action points for the long term is not that high. But if I was playing a 4-chapter game, I might want to stash that card at the bottom, as it would seriously dampen my action points over the course of the game once it came out. With that now resolved, we go to the bottom of the card. It says, however, there was one thing the survivors didn't need to be foretold: the invasion of the demons. It became part of the daily struggle for survival. Place 1 horde at threat 4 in Darkmere, not adjacent to a haven, and then place 1 horde at threat 4 in the Wandering Sea, not adjacent to a haven. And it appears the first one coming in is going to be the Bloodworm, and you can see it has an immediate effect. We'll go ahead and set it at level 4. The threat level is marked at 4, standee is here for the monster, and we're also, as an immediate effect, Shattering Roar. Place 1 curse on any hex with no X. The Darkmere locations are here, all the way around to this location here. So we'll place it here, as our haven is here, and it's not adjacent. And for the curse, we'll place it to the left of our haven. The next horde monster coming in is the Siren. It also has an immediate effect. Let's grab its threat tracker as well as its standee. It's worth mentioning that you'd want to make sure that your initiative row here from left to right is going lowest number to highest number. Based on the solo event card, this monster's headed to the Wandering Sea hexes, which is very thematic. The Wandering Sea runs from this hex all the way around to this hex, and it also cannot be placed adjacent to the haven, so we're safe right there. We've got an immediate effect to resolve. It says the hero with the lowest guile place their standee on her hex. And that's going to be our destroyer over here. He has 0 guile, whereas the traitor has 3. So from the beginning of the game, he's being pulled out of position. The last step of the event phase is to place an activation token on every Horde and Legion card, and on the last chapters, you do this twice. So we'll go ahead and use those fancy deluxe components, and they are double-sided, so you can actually flip them depending on whether you're talking with a Legion or the Horde. So in the Horde case, it's going to be the skull side. Let's get into Chapter 1's build phase, where we draw 2 feats from each of the hero's feat deck. We keep one of them per hero, and there's a 16 card feat limit across both heroes. So one hero could have 10, the other could have 6, and you're still within. But once you go over, you have to discard some, and then you put the other one at the bottom of the feat deck that you don't want from the 2 you drew. Let's start off with the Destroyer, drawing 2 feats and see which one we want to keep. The first one is Bloodlust. This is for a clash. Discard this card at the clash timing to roll the dice of your units that were destroyed here this round after damage on your hero's hex. That sounds pretty useful. And the next one is discarding this to gain 1 basic unit on any of your havens for every Horde and Legion in play. And this one you would do during your actions. As it mentions there, it always has the keyword as to when the timing of that card can be used. I honestly really like this one because I think there'll be a situation where getting additional units in play is going to be useful. All the feats in your hero's deck are going to be useful to your hero at different times, and that's part of the fun, trying to determine which feats are going to be most beneficial at what time frames. Now let's draw our feats for our allied hero and see what options we have. We have an archery one here. It says flip this to reroll any of your white dice before damage. That just automatically sounds very useful. And the next one is... this one is an always. When you use the trade action, gain 1 additional salt. You may trade with heroes in adjacent hexes. So why this is important is there is a trade action which is on the board here just off screen, and every time you take it, you always get a salt. This would ensure whenever you take it in the future, you're gaining 2 salt every single time. And the crazy thing about this, again, is that this one sticks around always. You always get to take advantage of it for as many times as you take that trade action. The archery one, unlike the ones over there for the Destroyer, this one gets flipped when you use it, but comes right back around for the next chapter, whereas the one I selected for the Destroyer gets discarded after I use it. Honestly, another tough call, but I'm going to go with the archery one. I really like the idea of being able to re-roll my archers, seeing as I have some and plan to potentially produce some and get them out there in the near future. Moving down the chapter track to the second section of the build phase, which has us building any units, towers, or walls we want from the reserve on any of your havens. Max 5 units per hex. As a reminder, if you have no haven, you choose 1 explored empty hex. So the focus right now is on this section of our faction dashboard, and especially the resources required to build each one of the units we might want to do, or even potentially bumping up our tower and wall defenses. Now, strategically, I'm keeping my feat card in mind that I have for the Destroyer because this allows me, when I discard it during the actions phase, which it isn't yet, but eventually it will be, to gain a basic unit on any of our havens. We only have 1 right now for every Horde and Legion in play, which means 2 basic units could come out for free, which means we could get 2 warriors or 2 archers or a mixture of the 2. So I want to think about that when I'm committing resources right now to actually pull units into the fray. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a Varg here, which is going to be 3 salt and 2 food being spent. Pretty expensive, but a very good unit that's going to bring in 1 red die. Now, on every single one of these, not only does the standee tell you what die it'll bring in when you're going into a clash, but it'll also show it right on the different columns for the units. Next, I'm going to pay 2 plunder tokens in order to pay for wall defenses and tower defenses. Next, I'm going to pay 2 salt resources to pick up a basic archer. The last thing I'm going to take is going to be for 3 food, 3 basic warriors. Now, what I'm going to be doing with my feat card that can bring in 2 other basic units in the future is I'm going to be aiming to get the basic archers in play. Again, those units are great because you can actually use them in 2 different sections of the battle, the archery section and the clash section, whereas the foot soldiers, the tribesmen in my case, only come in during the clash. So everything I've built is coming in at my haven, and it falls within the 5 unit max because the hero does not count as a unit. And just like that, I produced myself a little army, and also the defenses for my haven get placed on. That's going to do it. At this point in time, I got 4 plunder left, 1 food, and 1 salt. Now let's head to Chapter 1's action phase, where we get to take actions. Remember, we have 10 action tokens to spend across our 2 heroes that can use them. Now, the game has certainly thrown a kink into my plans because I thought I'd have both heroes in the exact same hex to start things off, but my poor Destroyer got pulled off into the Wandering Sea by the Siren, so I'm going to have to figure out a way to get this individual back close to where we're at without burning too many actions. Of course, I can always move to an adjacent hex with my hero for 1 action, but that would cost me 2 just to get back to where we are. Now, under the items that are available right now, this one's sticking out to me. In the actions phase, you can flip this to move your hero up to 3 hexes just for 1 salt. That sounds like a big time win. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to spend one of our action points to go to the market. Now, the faction dashboard has a full list of all the actions and what they do, and also if they cost anything. It's worth mentioning in the previous solo mode, you had 2 factions you were controlling with their heroes tied in each of those factions, and you'd be taking turns between the factions. So when one hero would go with their faction, you would take as many move and trade actions as you wanted, but the second you took one from the column on the right, that would end that faction's turn and you'd move on to the next. However, that has all changed in the true solo mode because now you have 10 action points that you can use at any time between either of these 2 heroes however you wish, which is awesome. So it gives you the ability to do a move, you could do a haven, then you could do a trade, you could do an explorer, and you could be bouncing between the 2 different heroes however you want because your allied hero now is a streamlined hero that's much easier to manage and deal with. There is 2 ties to these characters though in some of the actions. The first one is of course the trade. If you do a trade, you might be trading items between one hero and the next. So whatever heroes have a certain item, the other hero doesn't inherently get to use it unless they actually have it equipped and are in the right hex based on the action being done. The final thing to mention around actions for the solo mode is that the command action has been enhanced. Now you can move both of your heroes into combat with one command action. Again, normally with the command, you were able to move all of your units that are nearby and adjacent to a particular hex. You can also bring heroes in with them. So that allows you to use both feats and items from both your heroes in certain situations where it benefits you. And there's still a limit of 5 units per hex, but again, the heroes don't count towards that. So let's spend our very first AP going to the market. I'm going to have the destroyer be the one going to the market so my hero can go now and check out what is available based on attributes and cost for resources. We've got Imperial Deflectors, we have Blackfire, and we have this one down at the bottom that I am definitely eyeing here because of that movement. I think it's going to be beneficial later on. It'll be beneficial right away as well because I can get myself away from the Siren and back into the action to help everybody out. So I think I'm going to go ahead and spend my 1 salt knowing that I can easily get some salt back if I want to do a trade action. So we'll spend that final salt to take this card right here. And as it mentions, if it's empty, you draw a new one. So we'll go ahead and draw a new card to see what we could potentially get in a future market action. This one's great. As a part of a clash, if your dice show 2+ blanks, you're rolling really poorly, you actually gain a bolt, kind of a mitigation tool there, before damage on your hero's hex. I'm going to use a move action, so I can move my hero to an adjacent hex, even if it's unexplored, and your hero can cross impassable terrain. We'll move my trader hero from the home hex to this unexplored plunder hex. And now that we're here, we'll spend another action point in order to explore this unexplored hex. I've explored and revealed the woods area Dunkelholm. When you explore, if you want to find out what type of terrain it is, you simply look at the reference here and you'll see it's woods based on the icon. And as I mentioned, I paid the AP for that explore action right here. Now before we go ahead and read the tile, you'll notice that there are 3 sides which are impassable terrain, and so we're going to want to use this strategically to our advantage. Now I've chosen to place it like this because I plan to bring my army out of my home hex and into this forest location, so I don't want to have impassable terrain blocking the movement of my units because impassable terrain is going to stop player units, skeletons, hordes, and legions from crossing, but heroes can always cross over impassable terrain. Now as part of the explore action, we resolve all the effects that are here on the tile. It tells us first to gain 2 plunder. We're then told to remove any skeleton that's here. There isn't any. Then place 2 garrisons here. Now garrisons come in 3 levels. This is the first level shown. It tells us to place 2 garrisons though, so there's a second level we need to place on top. That's going to make this Imperial garrison that much tougher to deal with. Last but not least, it states that every player draws 1 feat and then discards 1 feat. As Hanzo the Trader was the one that explored, he's going to get to draw 2 feats and pick one. I've drawn 2 cards off the top of the feat deck. Let's find out what we have to choose from. The first one here is going to have an option where we can choose leadership to boost up or guile. And then in the center here it says, when you gain this, gain 3 resources, choose leadership or guile and place this under your hero cards. So that's actually a really strong one. Might want to go for that. This one here happens after combat. If you destroyed all Imperial units here, you gain an item from the market that you can use. That's also very powerful. It was a really tough decision, but I think I can benefit from the Spoils of War card inside of this upcoming battle. That's going to do it for the resolving of the Explore action. Let's choose to do something else. And as you probably know, any discarded feats are not discarded out of the game. They're just discarded to the bottom of the feat deck. The 2 plunder have been added to what I already had, so now I've got a total of 6 plunder and 1 food. It's again shared across both the heroes, same as the action points. Now my plan here is to bring my units, all 5 of them with a command action, into this area to fight the level 2 garrison the Imperials have here. But in order to get ready for that, and the fact it's a level 2 garrison makes it a little bit tougher, I'm going to go ahead and use this card I picked up earlier for the Destroyer, and it says flip this during the actions phase to move your hero up to 3 hexes. That's going to bring the Destroyer back into the fray, so we'll move from here 1, 2, and 3. Now, strategically, the reason this is beneficial is because I have a feat card on my red hero that states after combat, if you have 1+ units here, you gain 2 resources. So if we happen to do a decent job of taking down the garrison, we can gain additional resources. And I wouldn't be able to take advantage of that feat card tied to the red hero unless I got it into the same location as when the battle begins. For my 4th action point, I'm going to choose to command, and it states to pay 1 food. I'll be using the only food resource that I have to do this, and that's going to allow me to choose an explored hex, so I'll be choosing this hex right here, and move any of your adjacent units up to a maximum of 5 and/or heroes there, and units cannot cross impassable terrain, so again, this is the reason why I orientated the tile when I explored, to ensure that my units can actually traverse into this location. If those teeth-looking icons had been right here, these units could not have moved at this time. Now, 2 things to mention. The first is that I'm inside of my 5-unit max inside of a hex because the 2 heroes I have here do not count as part of that. And again, it's only talking about my units. So I've got 5 actual units down here, which hits the maximum for that hex. I could not bring any more in if I wanted to. Now, over here, because I've left this home location wide open, my haven is empty and unguarded. That's dangerous, but I do have a backup plan for that as well. I'll be dealing with that in the future with a feat card that I've got in my back pocket, as you guys remember from earlier in the video, that can allow me to bring some units into a place that I have haven for each horde in play. So I'll be able to bring 2 basic units into this space, but I can't use the card just yet because the moment I moved those 5 units into that space with the garrison, a battle ensues. Combat in the game is broken into 4 different parts. You have before combat, then you move to the archery round, then you move to the clash round, which essentially is your melee fighting, which will go on and on until something has been resolved. In other words, one of the 2 sides or both of them have been fully defeated, and then after the combat, you'll resolve things. So before combat's the first thing we check, and that is going to be the hex we're on, which is now covered in standees, but we know it's a forest hex, so then we reference the terrain effects section of the map. And it tells us for the woods that when we're doing the archery phase, we can reroll up to 2 dice. So that's really helpful. So now we move into the archery round, and we do have 1 archer at the very front of my pile of standees. It has a white die, so I'll be rolling a white die. And a level 2 garrison, which can be seen on the skeletons and garrisons chart here, is going to be rolling 2 white dice when in the archery phase. Now these dice are rolled simultaneously, but I'll roll for myself first, and then we'll roll for the garrison. So we'll roll the single white die that I've got, see what we get. That's a pretty good result, a skull and a shield. We'll talk more about that in a second. So we got some defense there and some offense. And then the other side got a blank and some defense. So first we look for the skull icons, and you can see I've got 1 of them here. So I have a hit against the garrison, which would essentially take a level away from it, dropping it from level 2 to 1. But because the garrison rolled a defensive die, that skull doesn't count, and the defense that I had on my die does nothing because they didn't hit me for anything. Now here's the deep regret that I have. As one of the actions I could have done before I did the command to trigger this battle, I could have done a trade action, which would have gained me 1 salt. And I should have done it because I have a feat card here for my hero, the trader, that states right on it to go ahead during the archery and clash round and pay 1 salt to ignore 1 enemy defense. So this would have actually allowed me to lower the garrison's attack value overall, because when you drop from a level 2 garrison to a level 1, the fight in general becomes easier when it gets into the clash round. So I have regrets on doing that. I'll be keeping an eye out for that in the future. Now something will be happening here with rerolls because the woods environment provides a reroll up to 2 dice for not only myself, but also for the enemy. So the enemy is going to reroll any blanks that they had, and they did have a blank, but here's the thing. Even if they reroll the white die, there's only a single skull on a couple sides of that die, and because I rolled the skull in the defense, I'm going to block whatever they roll anyway. So it's a moot point. It will not matter in this case, but there will be cases where it will matter. Now, just to show you the die, in terms of the different icons, there's no side that provides 2 skull icons, so there'll be no reason for me to reroll, as I got the best result possible off the die. And before we transition from the archery phase to the clash phase and get into melee combat, I do want to mention, keep an eye on your Druid cards. The top section of the card always triggers in the refresh phase, but the God power down below can be activated without having a bolt by spending an ether, and you might have an actual ability during the archery or clash phase that really helps you out. Now in this case, unfortunately, this is as close as it would get to helping me out, but it's not what I need. This one says ignore all the hits, showing a 1 die your enemy rolled. I really wish that had said shields, because that would have been perfect, and I definitely would have spent the ether, because that would allow me to hit the Garrison, knocking it from level 2 to 1 and make the clash a little easier. And last but not least, this is another feat card that my trader had, but again, is only usable for the dice that I have, not for the enemy. So I could not have flipped this and used this to reroll the enemy die. So at this point now, we're moving to the clash phase. We take a look at the standees that I have available, and the archer counts as part of the clash. So he's going to get his die in the equation, a white die, a red one for the Varg, the really large standee that I have there, and then the 3 tribesmen bring in 3 orange dice. Now here's my dice pool currently, and now let's check to see what the Garrison's bringing in at level 2. So this chart just reinforces my pain and regret for not having the salt I needed to get this Garrison down a level. You can see for a level 2 Garrisons in the clash, which is a sword, it's going to bring in a blue, 2 orange, and a white. If it had been down a level, it would have only been a blue and a white. Now I do have a feat card that would say for the Destroyer, if I had 2 Vargs, I'd actually gain an orange die into the pool. So again, make sure you check across your feats and your items to ensure there's nothing else that can be added to your die pool. But at this point, we've got both pools ready to go. We're going to go ahead and roll ours first. We'll grab our 5 and see what we get, and then we'll roll the enemies and go from there. Pretty solid roll. We got lots of hits, 4 hits in total, so hopefully we don't get too many shields and we can take this Garrison down. Again, the terrain effects not going to apply here because it was only for the archery phase. We're in the clash. So let's go ahead and see what the enemy's throwing at us. It doesn't appear like either side wants to play any defense whatsoever. As we're inside the clash phase, we cannot use this reroll off the feat card as it mentions archery. Now, what I'm tempted to do is potentially use an ether off of that Druid card I showed you earlier, God Power, allowing me to ignore one of the skull icons on one of the enemy dice, ensuring that my group of units stays more intact after this battle, because as of right now, I'd be losing 2 units, and then the enemy would be losing 4, but they only have 2 levels of the Garrison, so their Garrison is going to be destroyed anyway. So really, I'm just mitigating how much damage my units are going to take. So I'm going to use the Mountain Heart's God Power, removing the ether and ignoring all of the skulls showing on 1 die. When an ether is removed, you just place it with the rest of them, which is currently not in play. So right now there are 4, and we're going to go ahead and just tick one of these to a blank side because the enemy only rolled 1 in this case. So now we simply resolve the skulls, and that's going to have me removing enemy units as I choose. So I'm going to go ahead and remove 1 of my tribesmen, which is one of the weaker units that I have, and it's going to end up in the Chaos Graveyard. Now you'll also notice a difference in solo mode. When you go to the graveyard, you'll see it written right here. So it says, place your destroyed units here. In the scoring phase, Chaos is going to gain 1 VP for every unit here. That is a change from the way it was in the standard play from prior. Now the Imperial follows the exact same thing. It's going to be based on how many units are in that location in terms of scoring. So we were able to take down the level 2 Garrison, and that's going to provide a VP point for each level. So 2 for us. We simply head to the VP track, find the marker, and move it up by 2. And at this point, we're out in front, but remember, when the scoring phase comes around, that is when the Empire and the Chaos are going to start pumping up their VP. Now, if the Legion and Horde factions actually fight each other, which can absolutely happen, the winning faction gains VP, and then you remove the destroyed unit from the game. You do not place them in the graveyard like you do when a player actually loses units. Now, do you remember the reason I used the item card earlier that allowed me to get my Destroyer to the same hex that this battle was going to occur? Well, that was because I wanted to take advantage of this. After combat, if you have 1+ units here, you get to gain 2 resources, and I can choose whatever I want. I'm going to take 2 food resources because the food hexes that are currently unexplored are quite far away from where I'm currently at. And so until the next chapter, when I generate more food, this is a good time to pick some up. And it also allows me to do some more command actions right now in this chapter if I want to. Now the trader also has this feat card, Spoils of War, which you saw before. It says if you destroyed all Imperial units here, which we did, we took out 2 garrisons, we gain 1 item from the market that we can use. We're definitely going to take advantage of this. So when I'm choosing my item, I have to make sure that the hero can actually use the card that I'm taking, and I have 1 magic and 3 guile with the trader. So taking a look here, we could actually go after Blackfire here. We could go after Imperial Deflectors, and we cannot go after this bottom one. So it's really out of these 2 right now. Both these cards are really beneficial, but you'll see the top one here is used during the action phase and it's discarded. Then every player places a basic unit on any of their havens. So one-time use to get one unit out, not bad. But this one right here says in the archery phase, you pay a salt and you get to gain a white die before rolling once per round on your hero's hex. I definitely want the one that is more expensive. I think this will come in more beneficial overall. And the new item that comes out is a Witcher card, and it says always discard this to remove one activation token from any Legion or Horde card. That's actually really good. Now, a good strategy is always to try to place one haven for every chapter. You always start with your home haven, but as you continue to explore and you deal with enemies, you'll have open explored hexes you can then place havens on. As it mentions here, you can pay 3 plunder, and if there's no curse, enemy unit, haven, or X in your hero's explored hex, you can place one of your havens there. I've got 6 plunder, so we're going to absolutely do that. We're going to pay 3 right now, and we'll get rid of the 3 individual ones that I have here, discarding them in order to pick up a haven. Essentially, it comes off the leftmost side of the board, and that's going to open up resources that you're going to see later on during the production phase. The more havens you get out there, the more your increased resources are going to be. So we'll drop a haven right where we're standing with our heroes. Now at this point, we only have 5 actions remaining. Now this doesn't cost an action, but I'm going to certainly do this in the actions phase. We're going to go ahead and discard this card right here to gain 1 basic unit on any of your havens for every Horde and Legion in play. Now it is worth mentioning, earlier in the video, I mentioned that that card would allow me to bring in multiple archers. It's only going to allow me to bring in 1 archer, but I do have 2 sitting here in the reserve, so 1 is definitely coming out. Now, I was originally thinking about placing this unit inside of my home hex, but being that we have an available spot in with the rest of the individuals, and we do have now a haven there, I can choose to place this archer with the rest of my units, preparing for what I know will be coming, which inside of the Nemesis phase, that horde, the Bloodworm, is going to be trying to make a move towards a haven, and that haven's next door. So we know we have a fight on our hands in the future, whether I initiate it or the enemy's going to initiate it at some point. So let's go ahead and bolster up the units in this space. However, as much as I'd love to place that in with the rest of my units, I need to be smart, and we're going to place it in the home hex because there is a skeleton just 1 hex away, and there are effects in the game that can have the skeletons move, and if they end up inside of a space with a haven that is completely undefended, regardless of whether you have walls or you have, as I do, or towers, it will take out that haven. I cannot risk that. I don't want to risk it, so we're going to place an archer in that location. I'm going to choose to go ahead and take 3 trade actions back to back to back. I'm not actually doing any trades whatsoever. I'm simply just gaining the salt. So we're going to spend 3 action points right now in trade to gain 3 salt. And this is going to provide me with the ability to do some fun things around the archery when eventually we have that larger battle against the Bloodworm. And it also allows me to go to the market, which is what I want to do next. So now I have 3 plunder and 3 salt and 2 food. And Hanzo the trader is eyeing the Imperial Deflectors because he does have the Guile for this, and 1 salt we'll spend right now to take it. We're going to immediately go ahead during the actions phase right now and discard it to place an archer on the same space with the 4 other units that I have, and we'll refill this item to see what is coming in next. It is going to be a healing potion. So at the end of the day, I was able to get all the archers out that I wanted to get out in the first place, which worked out perfectly. I've got 2 action points remaining, and I haven't taken a quest action yet. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on the quest to see if they'll benefit you for upcoming things that may occur or things you're planning to try and accomplish. So for instance, you'll look at a quest, and in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see an icon here for a marsh. So if you had a marsh nearby, which we currently haven't revealed one yet, but if you had a hero in the space and you'd completed this quest, you'd be able to gain a purple die, which would add into the fray, which is quite nice. You also get the ability to try to solve or fail the quest overall by meeting one of the 3 criteria or more, depending on what it says. In this case, is 2, so you need to be successful at 2 of the 3 things here. And depending on which ones you're successful at, underneath of them, it'll tell you additional rewards you gain if you are successful in those things. So on this card for the Instruction of Druids, if I was looking for 2 of these 3 and I got the 1 shield and 1 bolt, that would satisfy the solve. I would get that. I would also get 1 VP and 1 VP as it lines up with the 2 that were able to be successful. And then I also get the advantage of what's down below on the quest. I'm going to spend 1 of my action points to do the quest action. We're going to do the Instruction of the Druid card we just saw moments ago. Now the 2 cards that are still here remain here, and you'll notice whether I pass or fail the quest I'm about to attempt, this space will remain open until the refresh phase, and at that point, that's when we're going to go ahead and draw new quests. So unlike item cards, where the second you gain one, the market's replenished, quests are there for the chapter, and once they're done, you don't get a new quest to fill the spot immediately until you go to the next chapter. All right, so let's go ahead and pay for that quest action. We're choosing one, rolling our hero dice to solve the quest, and of course I can choose which hero goes on the quest. And so you can take a look at the attributes of both heroes to see, and based on which dice they're rolling and what kind of icons they could get, what are the odds of you actually succeeding at the criteria here. So I need 2 of these to be successful, so I really want to find something that can roll shields and bolts, because getting the extra VP as the optional successes on top of it would be really nice. Now, out of the 2 heroes, in terms of the dice that they would roll, it's going to be the Destroyer that has the best chances of rolling shields as well as bolts. He has 1 blue die that can bring shields into the equation, and his red dice can bring in bolts. Now, there's only one side that actually has the bolts, but at least it's something. Whereas with Hanzo the Traitor, his white dice bring in literally nothing. The orange dice bring in nothing for bolts or shields, and he has to rely on just his magic for bolts. So there's kind of a little bit of a trade-off there, although he's really good at getting bolts off the magic dice. The shield one is tougher. So I'm going to try to see if we can get lucky enough. I think the odds are in our favor for rolling 3 red that we'll get at least hopefully 1 bolt off one of those 3 dice. And we got a blue die, which should be able to pull off the shield, but we'll see what happens. That is absolutely insane. I rolled exactly what I needed, and I did it on camera, so there's proof. You can see we got 4 skulls, we got 1 bolt, and we got 1 shield, which literally satisfies all 3 criteria, and we only needed 2+ to do it. So we're going to gain any one of our feats, which means I can go through my deck here for this hero only and pick any feat I want from his deck. Then I shuffle the deck and I discard the quest, and I also gain 2 VP on top of it. Anything you can do that gets you VP and gets your marker out further and ahead before the scoring phase is always a good thing. So I now get to pick a card right from the feat deck. Pretty awesome. Whichever one I want. We've seen the Bloodlust one before, so I could choose this now for free, literally. I could choose this one again, as we saw before. These are on the bottom of the deck. Again, we're going to shuffle this after I pick one anyway. Actions, discard this to gain 1 item from the market. Discard, and then even if you could not use it. So that's crazy. So you go to the market discard area, which I guess means nothing right now because we haven't had a market discard occur yet. You discard that during the refresh phase. So this is really not that great right now, but would be great later on. And again, you can hold it until you can make use of it in chapter number 2. Discard this to remove any of your units in 1 hex from the game. Destroy 1 skeleton or garrison for each of your removed units in 1 adjacent hex. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So if I had a bunch of units, for instance, on the home haven, and I wanted to deal with that skeleton just to avoid it potentially coming in and causing me grief, and I say had 2 there, I could just easily go ahead and use this to torch one of them from both spaces, essentially, and deal with it. And that would still keep somebody there for defense purposes. That's not too bad. And there's many different ways to use this card beyond that. Archery and Clash, this looks good. Flip this to lose 1 skull, but you gain 1 bolt. So you can use a god power. That, I think, might be the one. Frenzy. That sounds pretty good. If I want to bump up on Might and Magic, again, these are going to help me with rolls against quests. So as you saw moments ago when we're questing, this will bump up your chances on that. And then this one here is Troll. So if the Troll was destroyed here, I don't currently have the Troll in play. It takes 2 salt and 5 food to get the Troll out. So this is probably a later game kind of card. So honestly, out of all of them, I think Frenzy is the one that's going to be really nice. I do flip it, but it's a one-time use and it could come really beneficial when I go up against the Bloodworm in the future. With my feat card selected and my deck shuffled, which means the ones that we'd seen in the past that got discarded at the bottom of the deck could be anywhere in that deck now. We might even see them from the very top in the near future. Who knows? But the quest card I just went ahead and dealt with and have now resolved all aspects of it. The one thing I need to correct, and I mentioned this on screen, is how I described the bottom portion of the quest card. It's not an ability or some kind of effect you gain after you complete the quest. It's actually a benefit you get dependent on where you are when you do the quest. So when I go ahead and quest with my hero, if I'm standing in a marsh location, I get to gain 1 purple die into the test roll, which essentially makes the quest easier. So strategically look at the bottom of the card because it might help you out in your roll. In my case, I got super lucky and I got everything I wanted, but if I had been under marsh, I would have had even higher odds beyond what I rolled. And of course, if I re-rolled that right now, it probably wouldn't land like that at all. And additionally, you can't just quest hoping for success every single time. You are absolutely going to have situations where you fail and you're not able to maybe re-roll or deal with things in a particular way like you'd like, and you're going to be either giving VP points to the enemy or there's other fail effects that are going to impact you in a negative way. When quests are either successful or if fail, they're going to go in the quest discard pile, and you're not replenishing the available quests at this time. Now with my final action, I could do a number of things. I could choose to go back to the market with the salt I have to try to pick up an additional card. I could potentially do something on the game board, but really I want to keep things tight-knit because I think the Bloodworm is going to be coming in real soon to the Haven, and we're going to have a big battle there. And I want to make sure I've got enough salt backed up so I can actually use the ability that I have to pay 1 salt to ignore 1 enemy shield. This is not limited in any way. It literally says on it, pay 1 salt to ignore 1 enemy shield before damage on your hero's hex. So I could just load up on salt, and if any damage is coming through, I can actually just straight up ignore it based on how much salt I have. So it makes sense for me to go ahead and load up on salt before a potential basically archery clash battle ends up occurring. So we'll go ahead and do that for my final action, and that is going to end off the actions phase. So we're now going to move into the Nemesis phase down below, and it stays to activate legions and hordes once for each activation token on them in initiative order, lowest to highest. So these ones have 1 activation token each. There are game effects which will place additional activation tokens, meaning that they're going to activate multiple times in this phase, which is nasty. You'll also run into situations, as you saw earlier, where there's gameplay effects that take activation tokens away, which means you won't have to activate them during this phase. And that is strategically great for you if you do not want them to impact you in a negative way in certain situations. So in this case, going from the lowest initiative to the highest, we're going to start with the Bloodworm here and activate it. It's also important to note that some effects in the game will literally activate a Horde or Legion without the need of an activation token, so be aware of that specific wording when it crops up. There's a difference between activating Imperials and Hordes, so you'll want to take a look at pages 54 and 55 of the rulebook to find that, but in this case it's going to be the Horde in both activations as they are both yellow. Next, you're going to move your Horde 1 hex not further from the capital. So the capital is up here, so you're not moving it further away. You're always moving it closer to the capital, but there's a priority order in where this thing is focused. The first is into a haven, so Hordes are going to choose a haven over another hex and choose the haven with the fewest units. In this case, it's obvious because the closest one is going to be the haven it chooses, as it only needs to move 1 space and it gets inside of it. Now, if it didn't have this as an option, the next thing it would look for is into a hex with enemy units, and if none of the above apply, into an empty hex, remembering that a hex with a curse or skeleton is not considered empty. Then after that, any hex not further from the capital, but you count the hexes that form a route to the capital if you're not sure. And of course, if you have one of these monsters show up in the same hex where you have units, you are going right into a battle. Before the battle begins, make sure you check out the Horde card for the combat ability. You'll see here as a bolt, if it gets one, on a die roll, you place a curse in this location, and as we just talked about moments ago, that's going to award it VP. You don't want that happening. After damage once per combat, that can occur, so keep that in mind as you go through. And then this thing is going to be rolling lots of red dice, based on it being threat level 4 in archery phase, 2 red dice, and in the clash phase, 4 red dice. And again, the clash will continue until one side is defeated. Now, before we get into archery, I'm going to go ahead and use my Blackfire card here, which says to pay 1 salt to gain 1 white die into the fray. So instead of just rolling 2 white dice, I'll be rolling 3 white dice. I do have to pay that salt, so I'll use 1 of the 3 salt that I have. And you do this before you roll once per round on your hero's hex. Remember, we're inside the woods hex, which means both sides can re-roll 2 dice. So keep that in mind, and blanks are the only thing the enemy is going to re-roll, so that's terrifying on red dice for sure. Let's go ahead and roll these dice. I know mine are the 3 white anyway, so this is an easy roll to combine together. All right, so not bad off the hop. We got ourselves 2 hits and 2 defense, which is actually a really good roll on the white dice. I don't know what's going on here, but these dice love me. Blanks for the enemy, but the reroll kicks in from the woods. So let's go ahead and reroll these and see what happens. Oh my gosh. No one is ever going to believe me that these rolls are legit, but they are absolutely legit. So we just landed 2 hits, which is going to take 2 levels off the Bloodworm. Now, I even have this card here as a backup, but I get to use rerolls from the woods first for myself, and with the 3 dice that I roll, which are these 3 right here, I'm definitely keeping the one with a hit, definitely keeping this one with a hit. I don't need this one with defense. We might as well re-roll this one, and we'll re-roll it with the woods ability. So let's go ahead and see what happens. That's another hit, and because no defense came through for this thing, that's insane. 3 levels down. And that makes a massive impact because at level 4, that's going to drop it down to level 1 and only a single die going forward in the clash. Now, the Bloodworm is not having a good time right now. Walked right into our trap and is getting absolutely thrashed. We're going to go ahead and roll for it to see what happens. It is a hit, so it does actually get a hit through, but we're rolling our dice now. 2 whites for the Archer, 2 orange for the Tribesmen, and the red for the Varg. Let's see what we get. Oh, lots of blanks for me on that one, but we got exactly what we need to not only block the damage, but also do 2 through, which is more than enough to take out the 1 level it had left. So that epic destruction, and the fact it also didn't ever roll one of the bolt symbols, which is awesome. This thing's been destroyed, and as it mentions at the bottom, we gained 4 VP because of it. So we are now sitting at 8 VP. The dice rolls so far have been awesome for me. Whether that'll stay the same, I highly doubt it. Now we're going to move on to the next activation, which is another Horde, and it's going to be the Siren. Now, the Siren's got a couple things going on combat ability-wise. It says you cannot use bolts against the Siren at all, and then it says it uses bolts, and you place the Siren on the closest empty hex after damage once per combat. So the first thing the Siren will do is activate, placing a curse in its space. Again, if there was one already, it would gain 1 VP. So the Siren is going to try to move into a haven. There's none nearby. There's also no enemy units nearby adjacent to it, and so it's going to go ahead into an empty hex, which means one that does not have a curse or garrison inside of it. So as you can see, it is clearly on its way towards my home hex. Now let's move along to the production phase. In the production phase, look at your havens row, and the rightmost uncovered haven is going to be the one you gain resources from. So in this case, 4 food, 1 plunder, and 1 salt. Now we check out every hex that we have a haven on the game board, and we gain resources straight off the hex. So our home hex here will give us 1 of each of the 3 different types of resources. So we're going to get 1 plunder, 1 salt, 1 food, and then up here, 2 plunder. So we had 3 plunder, 2 food, and 2 salt. We're now adding in all of this. So now I've got 7 plunder. I've got myself 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 food, and I've got 4 salt. The final phase of the chapter is going to be the scoring phase. And we're going to go ahead and start here with the Empire, who's going to score a victory point for every hex with garrisons, and then a victory point for every legion in play, and a victory point for every unit in the Imperial Graveyard. So for every hex with a garrison, which there is only currently the capital as we destroyed the one that showed up in the place we explored, just 1 VP for that, and then 1 VP for every legion in play, but we have not drawn any legion up there in the top right-hand corner yet into the game state, so nothing there. And then 1 for every unit in the Imperial Graveyard, which there is none, so it's only gaining 1 VP. So we certainly held our own against the Imperials, but now let's check out the Chaos Horde. So it's going to gain 1 VP for every curse in play. That's a little terrifying. There are currently 4 in play. Then a VP for every Horde in play, and thankfully we took out one of them, the Bloodworm, but the Siren still exists. And last but not least, 1 VP for every unit in the Imperial Graveyard. And it's really, really important to mention that in the true solo mode now, every single unit provides a VP for the enemy. So you really want to be careful about not losing tons of units to them. It'll really bolster up their points. We're now told to return all units from the graveyards to the reserve, so I've taken the unit out of the Chaos Graveyard and placed it back in the faction board. Same thing for the Imperial Graveyard. If there was any there, basically everything gets cleared out. Now we go to us scoring finally at the very end of the chapter. It's going to be a you score 2 VP for each of your havens in play. So I've currently got 2 of them. That's 4 VP right there. Then you're going to get X number of VP based on the special hexes you have in play. So any hexes that show a VP icon is going to give you some. So my home hex shows an icon of 1, so that's going to be another one, so that's 5 VP right there. And then if we want, we can actually convert 5 resources paid for another VP for each one, so we can really ramp things. If we want to start burning all our resources 5 at a time of any combination, we can get VP off of that. So just from the boost of my havens for 4 and 1 off of my home hex, that's an additional 5. We are currently at 13. We've got a nice jump start on these guys to start off. Now the question is, do I really want to burn a lot of my resources? Not really. However, I'm going to throw it back to you guys and ask you whether you think I should convert anything to VP points. I've got 7 plunder, 4 salt, and for food, I've currently got 7. So I've got quite a bit, and I could convert some. I might be able to get 1 VP with 5 resources burnt. If I was to do that, which ones should I get rid of? Or should I just hold the resources so I can do quite a bit in terms of bringing out additional units? I do have a haven here that has room for 4 more. I could bring out some pretty powerful stuff this turn and really start making some headway across the game board in chapter number 2. But that's going to wrap up chapter number 1 and part 1 of Uprising, Curse of the Last Empire, True Solo Mode. I really think with this video by itself, you should get a really good feel as to how the True Solo Mode plays. And as we dive into chapter number 2, you'll see even more as we dig further into gameplay in the finale. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope this helps you make an informed decision on the upcoming GameFound campaign. You can find the link to that campaign in the pinned comment and video description. Thanks again for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.